Hi, Baby Boomer fans. We are Jackie and Janine, the Pfeiffer Sisters, and love to talk about the 1950s, inviting you to reminisce with us as we explore experiences of that decade.
We chronicled the distinct memories of our childhood in our book, While the Windmill Watched, a slice of rural America in the 1950s, which takes you on a notably historic journey through that often forgotten decade. We also want to hear about your experiences during the 1950s. We will feature guests whose special stories of that decade will bring to mind magical moments of reflection, some with tears, some with smiles, but above all, a good dose of laughter.
We would like you to chat with us as we bring to mind the sights and sounds so familiar to that time in history. Grab your favorite malt or Green River. Make sure you are wide awake and get ready to be inspired about the 1950s. Welcome to the 1950s Fun Chat. Welcome. We're so glad you joined us again for our 1950s Fun Chat. I tell you, if you're a baby boomer or if you are even someone who appreciates the 1950s or is curious about the 1950s, you will definitely want to subscribe to our channel because we bring in such wonderful guests who can share their memories from that decade. And just to get an idea of where you subscribe, look in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. There's that red subscribe button. If you click on it, we would just so thank you for that. And plus, what that allows you to learn is when a new Fun Chat is going to be coming live on our YouTube channel. And every so often, let's say that every week, we do put a promo up to let you know who our guest is for the coming Monday night's live stream. And it hopefully will perk your interest to be a part of that. Jackie.
Yes. Hello, everyone. And while you're perusing the screen, please note the banner on the bottom moving across. It is whilethewindmillwatched.com. And that is where you'll find so much more information about our project. I also want you to take note of in the upper right-hand corner of that beautiful cover. It is a beautiful North Dakota sunset, and it graces all the way around the book, front to back. And this book includes so many memories Janine and I have had about living in the Northern Great Plains in the 1950s. So I'm excited to introduce our guest. He is a returning guest. His name is Larry Augsburger. And when we were talking with him before, we found that he had so much information that he wanted to share about the 50s. He grew up in Green Bay, Wisconsin, and he now lives in Ohio. And we would like to welcome you again to our show, Larry. And it's called A Walk Down Retail Shopping Memory. Glad you're here.
All right, thank you.
During the 90s, the downtown area was a pulsing heart of town or city with a mixture of department stores, dime stores, hardware stores, grocery stores, gas stations, barber shops, beauty salons, and restaurants. Families might be living in apartments above retail spaces, but on many days, the sidewalks would be full of people doing their shopping, moving from one store to the next and often going to where their car was parked or to drop off their packages before heading to another store. Now, as we remember, parking was either parallel or diagonal along the street or within a parking lot. Curb parking spaces sometimes had parking meters, sometimes not. Sometimes these were monitored by meter maids or men who either walked or rode a motorized tricycle. Now, Christmas was almost a magical time with its window displays and decorations and music. And sometimes holiday music filled the air on the street due to business piping out joyous tunes. So in comparison, the summer was almost a drag as one moved along heat-scorching streets and then into air-conditioned stores. That is, unless one's destination offered air conditioning. But all this came crashing down for many cities as new, modern shopping phenomenon emerged in the 60s and 70s with the arrival of the mall. Now, Larry, please
Yes.
begin our walk down retail memory lane by sharing some of your memories of department stores. Let's start there. And then
Okay. One of the most outstanding things that stands out in my mind about department stores was their creaky wooden floors. That's something we just don't experience in today's malls where everything is built on concrete. These were old buildings, downtown buildings, and they were frame buildings, and they had wooden floors. And I just remember that so outstandingly that whenever you'd walk into the store, the floors would creak under you. And do you guys remember that as well?
Yes,
but
I
they
do.
were hardwood floor, or sometimes linen.
Mm-hmm.
I particularly remember it in the Ben Franklin or the Five and Dime store. Because not only would the floors be creaky, but to also get the aroma of all the variety of nuts that were roasting in that displayer, or they were kept warm in that displayer. And that fragrance permeated the store.
Yeah, I remember that too. That was more the dime store smell rather than the department store. But every place had a hot nuts, and you just buy them. They put them in a bag for you and walk around eating those nuts.
Mm-hmm. But one of my dad's favorite nuts was the cashew, and from what I recall, Jackie, do you remember? That's sometimes he would treat himself with a little bag of those warm cashews at the Five and Dime store. Or even, was it even at Finney Drug that we had that also, Jackie? Do you remember?
That's probably more likely.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like cat well, but in our situation, we always ended up only with peanuts.
Yes. Dad would we'd get peanuts with in the little bag, the Planters peanuts in the little cellophane bag, and what they cost maybe a nickel or a dime each. And so for us to ever get a nut that was more expensive, it was either Christmas time when we got nuts that we had to crack. Either the hazelnuts or Brazil nuts or almonds, or else it was a very special time, but they were more expensive, and so we didn't necessarily have them.
Sure. Well, I'm wondering if you women experienced having your shoes fitted using an X-ray machine. I just remember that so clearly. You'd put your feet under, and then you could see all the bones in your feet and then tell whether your shoe was going to fit or not. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Mm-hmm.
I do. You, Janine?
I do not remember that.
Oh, that happened at the Buster Brown store.
Okay. For us, it was more in the department store. But then I remember being so frustrated when Mom said that they were no longer allowing those. I thought, well, how do I get my shoes fit? Of course, always the thumb on the end of the shoe that felt whether it would fit or not too.
Right.
Well, speaking about fitting shoes or going to the shoe store, did you ever get to sit in little kids' chairs that were shaped like animals? And these were put up on a higher platform so that the attendant wouldn't have to bend over to fit the child's shoes.
Right.
You're bringing up a memory that I had escaped from me, but I do sort of remember that now. Yes.
That was fun. And of course, those animals were in different colors. There was yellow, I think yellow, green, blue, and red. And boy, I always wanted to sit in the yellow one if it was vacant.
But now the interesting thing was that when you finally made your selection, whether it was shoes or whether it was clothes in the department store or whatever, there was no light that beeped and everything was taken care of. Everything was written up on a handwritten invoice. And so the clerk would have to pull out a trifold or duplicate invoice and write everything down by hand and total it up by hand, oftentimes having an adding machine to be able to do that or doing it in their head and writing it down. We're so used now to the fact that you just blip on something and all that happens automatically. You forget that they had to maintain their inventory by manual means.
Yes. Well, and I know in a pre-email conversation that we had with you, you had talked about the pneumatic tubes that were used to relay the money from the customer up to the central office of the department store, and
Mhm.
then someone up in that central office would go over that invoice, I imagine, and make the correct change if there was cash change to be given. There were no credit cards then. And so then we'd often stand around and wait for our change to come back through that pneumatic tube. It was really exciting.
Yeah. Yes, I enjoyed that a lot, and oftentimes it would be clear glass, so you could see see the thing coming and going.
Yeah, yes. And for us, it was just one department store that did that in Bismarck. It was the Maury Allen store. Our
Mhm.
J.C. Penney used cash registers in different departments, and that
What
was
about-
really our other department store, wasn't it?
Excuse me. I wonder if A.W. Lucas didn't do that.
Oh, I forgot about that. Yes,
Mhm.
that's true too. But it'd be interesting to know in what decade did that particular mode of financial transaction in a department store quit, and when there was another mode, or probably the cash register that tallied the total of the bill, and then all those end of the day receipts went up to the office, and it was the tally of the money was compared to the what was put on the receipts and purchased, and to make sure it balanced.
Now I remember. Well, go ahead, Jackie. You were going to
No, I
add
was
something.
just- what else can you tell us?
Well, I'm remembering that the dime store used to operate on the same principle, that you would be in a department and you would cash out there and then go to a different place. And I remember my dad's frustration one time that he had chosen something in one area of the department store or the dime store, and they said, no, you go and do everything you want, and then you check out at the head counter. And and this was like, Walmarts and everything all do that today. But in that era, it was still, you had each individual cash register set out in the various different departments. And we had to get used to the fact you picked up everything you wanted and then checked out at the front as you exited the store. That was new to us.
Mm-hmm. Well, speaking of department stores, what do you recall about the windows, the window dressing, and what that was the mechanism that brought customers into the store? What do you recall about that?
I don't recall much about the average seasons. I just remember the Christmas displays, and they stand out to me. I would remember those, and of course, in many cases, they weren't merchandising the inventory. They were a display just to attract you. And I remember going and seeing some of the displays with the automatic skaters skating around and people woodenly moving. But I don't remember too much about looking at displays, say in May or July or August. What did you experience?
Oh, I don't remember as much either about those other days. It was the Christmas holiday that was just such a draw. There probably was a huge draw with Easter, the decorations that could be used then, as well as the change of clothing that would be required for that season, or that special Easter Sunday outfit that we'd have. But yes, definitely Christmas. And what I think is so interesting is, of course, I think of that's very nostalgic to me. Think of what you just described in the downtown store windows. And then when retailing moved away from downtown to a central mall atmosphere, it's that whole thing really changed. It didn't have the heart warmth to it, and the old fashionedness, and just the uniqueness of Christmas for me. But I did think was interesting. I have seen this fall, and what I think was even last week, and I can't remember what company was advertising on TV, but it was of a downtown atmosphere. The department store windows were decorated. It was so neat to see that again. There was snow on the ground. It was definitely a nostalgic look that was being portrayed.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I think about is that the mall can never compete with the downtown for Christmas display because there was something about the fact that you were outside. It was so cold. You were having to resist the wind, and you were torn between the enjoyment of the display and having to get in someplace where it was warm. I remember one time in particular. I think this was when we were still in Green Bay that the wind was whipping so hard. But yet I was so mesmerized by the display that I was torn between wanting to get in and wanting to stay and watch. And you can't experience that in the mall.
Yes.
Oh.
Well,
Excuse me, if you're done, Janine, or you want to
yeah,
have one
go
more?
ahead.
Okay,
Yeah.
I was going to say, let's move on to grocery stores.
All right. Well, I'm remembering about the grocery store that everything was checked out individually, and mom and dad would come up to the counter, and they would have a cart full of stuff, and they would put it on the belt, and the cashier had to pick up every item, look at it, insert the price into the cash register, and then hit the entry button with the side of her hand. And it would take a long time to get through a cart of groceries as fast as she could peck. And I oftentimes wondered how accurate those were because everyone was independently entered onto the tape.
Yes, that's right. But also, too, didn't you discover that the checkout lady, who oftentimes was in this perky little uniform, replicated the store image, the grocery store image, but they oftentimes would talk to you and make conversation at the same time they were doing all this. So it was customer service right there in front of you. And boy, they had to be very adept at entering in accurate figures for what you're purchasing.
I remember mom and dad had a particular woman that they liked to go through her lane at one of the stores, and got to know her well. They had no contact with her other than checking out at the grocery store. But I remember that one time that it was a particularly bitter winter, and her telling them about how the checkers suffered because they were there close to the where people were coming in and out, and all the cold wind would blow in. And she confided in them that she was wearing pants under her skirt.
That would have been a sin back then, almost.
We forget about how it was expected that women wore skirts then. And the uniform was a skirt, and yet it was sort of scandalous that she was wearing pants under there. But it was a survival thing. She was just so cold standing there with that cold wind blowing on her.
Mm-hmm. I'm thinking about hardware stores or wherever televisions were purchased. And of course, in the 50s, that was a novelty to have a television. And basically, they were black and white televisions, at least at the beginning of the 1950s decade. But do you ever recall having stood outside the window of a department store or an appliance store and watching television from the outside?
I don't have a memory of that. I probably did, but none of those things stand out in my mind. I don't recall that.
Okay. All right. Well, Larry, go ahead, Jackie.
I was going to say, I want to kind of get back to grocery stores, which would lead into gas stations, because I would like to talk about those bonus giveaway items.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, both grocery stores and gas stations, in my experience, had giveaways. And the thing that stood out to me the most was a grocery store that gave away place settings of Melmac dinnerware. And Melmac came in a variety of designer colors. I remember a light green, a yellow, a light blue, a pink. I'm not sure what other colors there might have been. But anyway, there were 5 of us in our family. And so we accumulated 5 different place settings with all different colors and that became our main dinnerware. That's what we ate on every meal, was that Melmac dinnerware. Did you guys do the same thing?
I don't think we didn't get that. I think we were looking forward to the S&H green stamps or the gold bond stamps.
Uh-huh.
Mm-hmm.
I have to show you this bowl.
Okay.
Oh, yeah?
Bring back memories to you.
I don't. No, I never saw one like that.
Well, when we talk about getting premiums from buying gasoline,
Mm-hmm.
it was rare for us to fill up our car with gasoline in Bismarck because we had a gas barrel on our farm, and at that time in America, you could fill your car up at home and on the with that farm tank. But there was a certain time, and we often went, Dad often liked going to the Texaco station, and they didn't have the premium display set up in between the tanks, or the
Pumps.
yeah, the gas, yes, where you dispense the gasoline into your car. But this one service station, I can't remember what the name of it was, and I always, whenever we drove past it, I always thought, oh, whoa, I'd love to stop there and get gas. But evidently it was with premium gas. You bought so much gas, then you had coupons or whatever to purchase any of the beautiful sparkly pieces of dishware that were inside
Mm-hmm.
this clear glass display case in between those gas tanks. And
Mhm.
so I do remember when Mom selected this bowl, and I use it even now as a mix. I'm going to get it in the camera as a mixing bowl. And believe it or not, with our children, our one daughter, of all the things that she wants of ours, she wants this mixing bowl. So I think that's really kind of cool, and that it is still in good shape.
Yeah. I wanted to change the topic to be sure to mention sales tax. Now, I don't know if you North Dakotans had sales tax like we did in Ohio. When we lived in Wisconsin, we had no sales tax. You got done, and whatever the totaled up, that's what you paid. But when we got to Ohio, we discovered that there was a sales tax. And this really would confuse us. You'd ring up $10 worth of stuff and then end up having to pay $10.40 for what you had gotten. The rate at that time was 4%. And the interesting thing was that the merchants were required to give out little tags or stamps that showed how much tax you had paid. And so when you got your purchase, not only did you get your stuff in a bag and the receipt, but you got enough stamps to show how much sales tax you had paid. And that always bamboozled us when we moved from Wisconsin to Ohio, to get used to all the sales tax and those sales tax stamps that we had to use. And then that added to another complication. In Ohio, food was not taxed, but the other things that you would purchase were taxed. So that meant that whenever you came up to the checkout counter, you had to separate out the taxables from the non-taxables. And so if we were buying dish soap or laundry detergent or a mop or something like that, all of that had to go first. And they would check out all of the taxable stuff, calculate the tax, you would pay it and complete that transaction, get your sales stamps. And then after that, you would check out your groceries because there was no tax on that. And oftentimes it was discovered then that you'd forgotten a taxable item and would have a third transaction to pay for that item, which made life very complicated compared to what it is today.
Well, Larry, then what did your family do with those tax stamps? Did you have to report those? Or that was just for your benefit to know how much sales tax you had paid?
I think it was just this. The merchants had to give it out to show that they had charged the tax. And so they were tearing them off. And so that was showing that they were indeed charging the tax. We would just collect them or could throw them away because they served no purpose, except there was the fact that charitable organizations could collect those and redeem them for a tax refund from the state. And
Okay.
that became one of the children's activities when we would go to the women's organization at church. When Mom would go to, it was called WMSC, Women's Missionary, something or other. Our task would be to separate all the sales tax and bundle them into 50s. And then they would be sent in and we would get a refund back on that. So,
Okay.
yeah, but at a certain point, then they stopped doing that, and you just paid the tax without getting the stamp, and so then that went away. But yeah, it was one of the interesting things, the living in the 1950s.
Mm-hmm. Well, on the subject of parking downtown, tell us more about that.
Well, it was always you go and hope, cross your fingers that you're going to be able to get a spot, and that the spot would be fairly close to the destination you were hoping to go to. And oftentimes they would be very, very tight. Dad would have to be quite a parallel parker to get into the place. And then, of course, we always had to feed the meter. And I think that the meters were limited to an hour. And so if you were going to be spending more than an hour, then somebody had to run back and feed the meter. And so Mom would be watching her clock and she says, 5 minutes till we're done. And so Larry, when you run, put another nickel in the meter. And so we'd have to do that. And after a while, we get tired of that. And there was a parking lot in Lima, quite central to everything. And we could pull in there and park and just pay one fee. And then we could stay as long as we wanted without having to feed the meter.
Jackie, do you remember much about our downtown Bismarck parking in the 50s?
Yes, at one period of time, there was a meter. I mean, a little guy would ride on his motorized tricycle, a police person, and mark. And then, that Dad would maybe watch that, and then he'd move the car ahead or back, that the little mark back tire wouldn't show.
Yeah, I heard my dad talk about that. I never experienced it, but moving the car just a little bit so that the tire would show, and
Yes.
Because they marked the tire to show that it had been sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
Correct.
Well, and you're right. Once you got a parking spot downtown, you really didn't want to have to look for another one, especially if it was a summer afternoon and you were parked in the shade. You really didn't want to have to move that vehicle.
And one of the things that my parents did that I would never have ever done as a parent was that they would leave us in the car. It was a hassle taking 3 kids along every place, and so oftentimes they'd say, "You just stay in the car." And this was not unusual. We'd see the other kids in the same way. And of course, in that era, you didn't have to have a key to roll the windows up and down. You cranked them yourself.
Yes.
And so I could see us sitting there sweating away in the back seat of the car with the windows down as far as they would go, waiting for Mom and Dad to get back from their shopping. And no way in today's world any parent would ever do that, I can admit.
Would hope not.
Well, did you ever sit in the front seat behind the steering wheel and pretend that you were driving and you were going on vacation while you
Sure.
were waiting for your parents?
Yes. I
Well,
remember.
Larry, we're getting about to the end of our broadcast today, but tell us if there's one particular memory that just floods your soul with happiness about downtown in the 1950s.
Well, I'm going to answer differently from what you're asking.
Okay.
I'm remembering an evening when we're all sitting around in the living room, and Mom is reading the newspaper, and she says, "Hey, listen to this." She says, "Have you ever heard of a mall?" And none of us even knew what a mall was. And so she read the article about this place that was coming to Lima, and it was going to have all the stores under one roof. And in the center, it was going to have a fountain, and you would park in a big parking lot, walk into one door, and you could go all over the place. And I remember our being astonished by this. and thinking, wow, what kind of a place can that be? And
Yeah.
of course, in 1965, it opened, and it gutted downtown. That particular mall, there were two malls that opened the same fall, but that mall took J.C. Penney, Sears, and the Leader, which was a more upscale department store, and it also had the Woolworth store. There was four of the main aspects of town that were gone. The other mall took away the Ward store, and
Oh,
yeah, in just 6 months, the city was destroyed. And so that's not a happy memory, but that's sort of the transition point
Mhm.
between the good times we had there in the 50s and
Yes.
the devastation of downtown.
And now we are kind of back to even malls are going by the wayside,
Yeah,
and it's so much online ordering.
that's
That's
right. One of those two malls that opened in 1965 is now a parking lot. I mean, they tore the whole thing down.
oh,
But the Lima Mall that Mom was reading about still exists, but the Sears is gone. The
mhm.
the big time department store that went in has changed hands a number of times, and now it's just an empty lot. Macy's and J.C. Penney still hang in there, but I wonder how long.
Yes, yes. Larry, this has been delightful. Our trip down memory lane in the
Good.
1950s in retailing. It's interesting to learn of some of similarities of what we have today, but so much of it was different 70 years ago or
Yeah,
60,
it
70
really
years ago.
was. And that's
Mhm.
why I wrote back to you and said, I want to talk about this because that's really where my memories have gone the most now is the difference between going downtown then and going shopping now. And I haven't been in a mall for I think 3 or 4 years now. Everything's online.
Yes,
Mhm.
we're all about convenience, aren't we?
That's that's right.
Yes, yes. Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Larry, our guest, Larry Augsburger.
Good. And
Yes, we appreciate you making a return visit to the 1950s Fun Chat.
okay,
So
thank
until our next time, we invite you to think about the swell times of poodle skirts, soda jerks, and those cool cars.
Be sure to click on that red button, subscribe. It's a subscribe button. And then the thumbs up button. Click on that icon. Tell your friends, even your relatives, about the 1950s Fun Chat. So do join us live every week, Monday, 8 Central. And if you can't join us at that time, view our YouTube program found at the 1950s Fun Chat.
If you want to learn more about the Pfeiffer Sisters, Jackie and me, you can go to our website and you see that ticking across the bottom of your screen. It's wildthewindmillwatch.com. It's the same title as our book. So not only will you learn more about Jackie and me, but you will also have the opportunity to purchase the book from that website. And of course, with the holidays upcoming and it's a gift-giving season, we would love it if you would remember our book as a gift. It might be a little big to put in a stocking, but it certainly wraps up pretty well. And so anyway, remember the website, wildthewindmillwatch.com. We've had so much fun today, and we hope that you have too. So we'll see you next time on the 1950s Fun Chat. Bye-bye.
We appreciate and thank each and every one of you